Did you know that the average person is interrupted between 4 to 12 times every hour? To put that into perspective, that means you're being interrupted at least every 15 minutes. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm interrupted in the middle of working on something, I'm typically annoyed, frustrated, or even impatient. And I'd say that I'm not even interrupted as much as the average person is. But as we look at Scripture today, we see that Jesus was constantly being interrupted. And in Matthew chapter 9, we see Jesus has just called Matthew to follow him. And as they are at Matthew's house eating, Jesus is teaching and answering questions so the Pharisees and the crowd. And then while Jesus is speaking, a ruler enters into the house and tells him that his daughter has just died, but that he believes if Jesus would just come and lay his hand on her, that she would come back to life. And there are a couple things to note from this interruption here. First, Jesus wasn't bothered by this man. In fact, he was moved by his faith. And in verse 19, the scripture actually says Jesus rose and followed him. It doesn't say that Jesus lashed out at the man for interrupting his teaching. It doesn't say that Jesus told him to wait until he was done talking before he could address the man's need. No, the scripture says that Jesus heard the man's need and he was immediately moved into action by it. The other point that we need to note from this interruption is that the ruler's confidence in Jesus was amazing. This man was willing to enter a house he was unfamiliar with, interrupt Jesus from teaching, and even explain this troubling situation in front of total strangers. Now, as I read this scripture, what I see is a man who was willing to do whatever it took to present his request to Jesus. He wasn't worried about his reputation. He wasn't concerned about what others would think of him because he was so confident in Jesus' ability to heal. And so Jesus and his disciples, they follow this man to go and pray for his daughter. Now, on the way to go pray with this man's daughter, Jesus is interrupted again. This time, he's interrupted by a woman who wanted to touch the hem of Jesus' garment because she believed even that would heal her of her disorder. Now, when she reached out and she touched Jesus' garment, she was instantly healed. And in that moment, Jesus turned to the woman and he said, "Take heart, daughter. Your faith has made you well." Not only was Jesus not bothered by this interruption, but he responds and even fulfills her request of healing. Jesus never lost sight of his mission to seek and to save the lost. Even in the midst of busyness and interruption, Jesus continued to show grace and love to those around him. Now, as Jesus and the ruler approached the ruler's home, they saw a crowd mourning the death of the girl. But Jesus says to go away, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping. Jesus, he enters into the house, he grabs the girl by the hand, and she was instantly healed and brought back to life. So what can we learn from this chapter? The first thing we need to remember is that our mission is people. And with people comes interruption. Interruptions will be something that we deal with all the time. Now, how we handle those interruptions will be what determines the impact that we can make on the people around us. The second thing that we need to remember is that Jesus still responds to faith. Just as Jesus healed in response to faith throughout this chapter, we have to remember that he's still healing today. Too often we're quick to jump ship when the going gets tough. We're ready to just throw in the towel once our faith is challenged by situations that we're facing. I want to encourage you today, don't give up on what you're praying for. If you're facing a difficult circumstance today, let it build your faith, not crush it. The same God that responds to faith in Scripture is working in me and you today. When we keep our faith in God, he shows up by working in and through